Hello, everybody. This is Jason Grant, and today I have a very, very special guest that I've been contemplating about talking to for a couple of weeks now, Marni Harow, who is joining me to talk about self-integration for women. And I promise you that this is going to be the last bit of kind of some sort of narrative that I'm putting together here, just because it's good for the YouTube to have, like, the introduction. But Marni, let's start with the simplest question. Who are you?
Who am I? That's not so simple, by the way. Who am I? I am an individual who is on a journey, I think, like most people, to find what's real and to fully actualize myself as a human being across several planes, both professionally and spiritually, and really find like what it was that I was put on earth to do. I think that that's at the core of what most people want, even though we get very confused of how to seek it.
So just to give a little bit of context for those who end up watching this, I saw your YouTube video, which was about applying Jordan Peterson's 12 rules of life, not just to men, but actually, hey, does this work for women? And you found out that it works very much. Can you just give us like a sort of just a quick synopsis as to, what that video is about, just for those who haven't seen it yet?
Absolutely. It went back even prior to Jordan Peterson's book. In the video, I talk about the fact that I found myself a few years ago, 4 years ago, after a very difficult divorce that I'd gone through. My ex-husband had become a drug addict, which is it's a special form of hell going through that. And I found myself afterwards feeling completely lost and going through what's known as a dark night of the soul, where I underwent a complete ego death. There was an entire paradigm shift of the way that I viewed myself and the world and myself within the world. And I felt completely helpless. I didn't know how to conduct myself anymore. And I started searching online. And at the same time, I discovered Jung and Nietzsche, both who had a profound influence on my grasp of being a human and why we reach these places within ourselves and how to make order out of that. And then I found one of Jordan Peterson's courses online, where he was teaching his class about Jung and about Nietzsche and about personality. And his whole concept at the time was maps of meaning. That was his first book. Anyway, it really spoke to me. The way that he took these really complex, intricate, esoteric ideas and made them so practical. The most famous meme these days is clean your room. But at the time, I literally applied that to my life, and just having some sort of structure of how to be and how to behave as a foundation was extremely helpful. And what kept me so intrigued by him afterwards was as he was propelled into stardom and involved in all these scandals, he actually he lives out the things that he discusses. He walks his talk. And watching that was incredibly inspiring. And there's something so right about it in a very historical context, which made me really open up and listen to what he's saying. So that was Jordan Peterson. He was incredibly helpful in that sense.
So I found your video, like I think I just kind of watched it like this, for some reason it just kept me glued.
The quality was so bad.
It just kept me glued to the screen because I felt like you were talking straight from your soul. And today, like, look, every day I walk around and I spend at least an hour contemplating. Okay, and and sometimes I contemplate on a set theme, and sometimes it's kind of just pretty random. And
Mm-hmm.
and today, what came to me was, this is fresh off the bat. No one's ever heard this before from me. Is that soul is very simple. Soul is simple, and ego is incredibly complicated. Ego is incredibly complicated, and so what I've seemed to have resolved in my mind is that if I can speak from the soul, bypassing even the heart, things are going to be incredibly simple and pure. Even heart is an object of quote unquote physical reality. And as such, it can be full of evil. So when people say, talk from your heart or live from your heart, it's like, unless your heart is pure, you will operate like the devil. But if you're speaking and operating from the soul, all you can ever be is pure. That was my little sort of contemplation during sort of lunch break today, and it was sort of springy day here in London. And it was like thinking, soul is simple, and there's something so profoundly resonant in that. What? Tell me a little bit about your process of self-actualization and individuation. How is this working out for you?
Okay. I hear what you're saying, what you said about that. I do think that as human beings, we have pretty much, I would say, 4 different compartments that make us up. We have the soul, we have the heart, like you were talking about, which is basically our emotional body, our emotional content. We also have the spirit, which is different than the soul. I feel like the soul is something permanent. It's something everlasting. It's what you are as a life, right? That's what leaves the body when we die. Your spirit, on the other hand, is what makes up your personality, what makes you individual, and what gives you that fire to go after life, right? Your motivation, what propels you forward. And that's really where I think most people struggle is developing that uniqueness. Now, you're talking about the ego. The ego, I feel, has a very important role to play in our life. And at the same time, it can totally destroy us. What it basically is a construct that we start creating from a very young age. It's almost like a filter that we use for the world, and you construct it based on the information and the data that you're receiving from your surroundings. Where a lot of us will run into trouble, I would say, is when the ego is very, very false, and you completely identify with the ego, and you end up ignoring your emotions and ignoring your spirit and your truth. So when we talk about actualizing, that would actually mean getting in touch with all the different elements of your character, and expressing them authentically. And truth is, being honest is the greatest thing you could do for yourself, because that helps you move more rapidly. That will amplify your entire process, because you're listening to yourself, you're being honest with everything, good and bad, and then you can keep moving from that authentic place and develop it further and basically go deeper within. If you're not honest with yourself, it's usually because you've come across something uncomfortable or something that you deem unacceptable by society, and you're trying to hide that. So I would say the first step to individualizing, right, and to actualizing yourself is to start shutting out society. Where it gets complicated is when you go into your subconscious or your earliest memories, the earliest point in your development, which from what I've seen is from the time you're born until you're about 7 years old, when your prefrontal cortex is being developed and you're incredibly impressionable. And everything you're learning and the way you're orienting yourself with the world is all based on the people in your immediate environment. So that's when a lot of the trauma and the imprint is first affects us. I know that a lot of people who struggle with addiction crises, especially, which is basically escapism. And when I talk about addiction, I mean drugs, alcohol, food, video games. Anytime a person is so uncomfortable within their consciousness in the present that they feel the need to escape, to flee, that's usually because something that happened to them at a very young age is somehow being triggered. And it makes them so uncomfortable with something in their immediate present that they do feel the need to flee. So in order to basically take apart our ego, take apart the false part of our ego, the walls that we put up, you have to do that in order to become whole again. You have to go back into the painful times in your childhood where you rejected parts of yourself because the message that you received from your environment was that it wasn't good enough or it wasn't acceptable, or gender-wise, as a woman, you should be more like this. As a man, you should be like this. And then you make this mental note, don't do that again. Don't say that again. Don't behave that way again. And then you just fragment little bits of yourself off to the sides more and more. So in order to be honest with yourself, you have to bring them back in. You have to let the things that you've been repressing maybe your entire life come out and give them room to breathe and explore them. So you can't be judging yourself.
Like I'm speaking to you right now. This is the first time we are ever speaking. Like I just saw your YouTube video and I thought, like, that's it. I'm reaching out. I'm gonna have to speak to you. That's it. So it's what strikes me here, and this is what I quote unquote expected. Not expected in that sort of like I'm expecting this, but expected is in just a natural flowing state. I don't think anything else would have happened between you and I other than to just kind of effortlessly agree and get along in this kind of conversation. We've been doing lots and lots of work at Integral around this idea of integration and self-actualization, because what I'll tell you how it happened. Just a quick story. This time last year, I had absolutely everything in my life, and I never felt worse. It was terrible for some reason.
Everything like material possession.
No, not even just that. I mean, family, health, material possessions, happy work, balance, all this kind of stuff. I literally had everything.
Yeah.
And other people were telling us, you are like, model, my wife and I, you're like model couple and family and children and house and blah, everything. And it's just like, as people were saying this, I was just feeling worse and worse. And I was thinking, what the hell is going on? What the hell is going on? And as I was looking around for reasons as to why this would have been, I couldn't find a single person, material thing, and circumstance. And it's like, maybe this is, sometimes a joke. It's like, us men are so dumb, right? Us men are so dumb that we need to be like, looking around, doing this kind of 360, looking around for so many times until we go like, hey, because there is nothing out there that's threatening me and causing me to feel shit about myself, it's me. It has to be me. And so I then thought, but hold on a second. Last 15 years of my life, I've been working on precisely this, self-actualization. And
have you?
Yes, absolutely. And what I thought was really systematic process. But I got to a point where I was feeling the worst ever. Okay. And And I thought I have to do something a lot more industrial, quote unquote, right? Something that's really intense, but also very holistic, and something that's not going to leave any stones unturned.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how we ended up designing a program called Fresh Mind, which uses integral theory, which is theory of everything, and then systematically goes through every single line of development, as it's known in Fresh Mind, which is your individual intelligences. And I know that Jordan Peterson sort of dismisses this outright, but you know, people have individual specific lines of development around emotional, physical, academic, social. There's like 16 or 17 of them. And what I ended up designing is a process through which I would go systematically through every single line of development and talk out every single issue I had across every single one of those lines, and then systematically clean through all those issues.
Yeah,
so
amazing.
And that's what Fresh Mind is. And then I got my friend Anthony to coach me through this, because I didn't trust myself to kind of tell myself the truth.
Right.
And I thought there was maybe like 5 or 6 issues that I needed to resolve. Perhaps, you know, just niggly little bits and bobs.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, in the first 3 sessions of Fresh Mind, you know, where Anthony was just kind of asking me questions, what else is happening in this, what else, what, there was 16 pages of A4 that I generated. And as I was talking through this, half of it was like, oh my God, I just feel embarrassed even saying this, but it's true about me, what I think of myself. And
there's no shortcut through that, by the way. There's no shortcut. And it's so, if people don't realize how detrimental it is, you think you can just move on from these things, but you're carrying it around. It's taking up energy. Even repressing it ends up taking up energy, and it takes you out of the moment. You know, people talk about being in the present and all we have is the present. It's 100% true. Now, when you're dragging all that stuff around with you, not only is it taking you out of the present moment, you're also then, a lot of your actions are being predicted in spite or despite of all that stuff that you're still carrying around. You're not living from a pure place. It's not, you know, it's like a pipe and there's all these things blocking it up, whether or not you're aware of it. I mean, the human mind is great that it can put these things to the back of your mind so you can actually function as a normal human being throughout the day. But no wonder you end up feeling at some point like you're like the walls are caving in on you, you know, like you're choked.
Totally. And then, so just before we started, you know, you asked me how am I doing, and my standard answer now is perfect. I literally am perfect. And so when people say, hold on a second, nobody is perfect, I go like, you're still having a lot of work to do there, because actually the total opposite is true. Everybody is perfect. They just don't realize their own perfection. And,
absolutely.
And when we say the word realize, it's like real eyes, okay? Real eyes, seeing yourself. And that is the self-realization, seeing yourself for who you are, and then rebuilding back up from the first principles in a clean way, precisely picking and choosing whatever it is you want to be, because you can literally be whatever you want to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, part of perfection doesn't mean that everything is incredible all the time and luck is always good. It's when you release the resistance, when you understand that life is ebbs and flows and ups and downs. You need that. You need the hard times propel you to desire things to be better again. I read in some study where it's as if little holes open up in your heart every time your heart expands, and then you need to fill these holes. But that's what motivates you to want to live. Otherwise, why are you alive? What are you setting out to achieve? You need those regressions. They teach you so much about yourself and the world.
Totally. And it's like Alan Watts in his talks about, you know, that you can't have a mountain without the valley, you know, and increasingly people seem to be wanting all the upside and none of the downside. Yeah. And it's like what are you talking about? That's really definition of kind of
life.
Just flatlining. You know, it's just like a flatliner. You're dead then.
Well, I think people are afraid of losing control. That's a huge motivator in life. Well, there's the animal side of it that we're taught to fight or flight. We're almost always on the lookout for issues. But people make themselves anti-fragile by not exposing themselves to challenges in life. You actually become weaker. This was something else that Dr. Peterson talks about in his work, how he'll take people who have these phobias and he'll gradually expose them to more and more of it. And I mean, I think in general, that's how you build muscle, right? That's you do put yourself in small challenges. So I think sometimes people get overwhelmed, right? They'll try and take on too much at once. You have to be smart. You have to get to know yourself and get to know how you work and how to conduct, and always push yourself just a little bit. You know, we'll use the workout analogy again. Whenever you work out, don't go crazy. Push yourself just a little bit outside your comfort zone. Impress yourself just a little bit. It's wonderful for self-confidence. But don't burn yourself out. Don't throw yourself into a place where you're completely out of control. And that's it. It's stable. It becomes very stable. And it's the lessons along the way. That's how you learn these things. Because on the surface, things can look really good or really bad. What's the process behind it? What are you gleaning from it? How is it changing you? Pay attention to yourself always at every step of the way. Yeah, shoot.
So I've got, it's like basically this is kind of like my mind is a little bit blown here, because every time you say a sentence, I've got like a follow-on question potentially that I could ask. But look, let's focus a little bit of like around here in terms of, is there a more specific process of self-actualization for women compared to men? What's your kind of angle on this?
I mean, I think that it's slightly different for women and men, because a lot of it is embracing of the other traits, right? I spoke about that briefly in my video. I think that as a woman, I had a lot of conditioning as to how to be a woman, and a lot of subconscious limitations that I'd set for myself. And I had to overcome those. What I'd actually, up until that point, looked for in a partner were all the traits that I thought I could not give myself, that I had to rely on a masculine counterpart in order to sustain those things. So when I started my own process, I sat down with myself and I was very honest with myself, and in deciphering what are those things, like what is it that I look for in a man to kind of complete me, and how can I start giving those to myself? So I think in general, being more logical, being more organized, being responsible, thinking about the future, all these traits that I never cultivated within myself, that I always sought to get from men around me. And once I grew those, it really helped direct me into becoming more complete. I think that men, you need to do the opposite. You need to integrate more of the feminine aspects into yourself, more empathy or compassion or openness, or the willingness to heal yourself. That's really important. And that's also how we can help each other. We can reflect that back to each other. I think with modern feminism today, they don't understand this really deep power that women have, this ability to bring out the best in men. We can do that. We can reflect these things back to them. We can provide a space for them to express themselves where they don't necessarily feel comfortable, or again, if their conditioning was not part of that, being honest, being emotional, being sensitive. So for a woman, it really is a stepping up to that. stepping into the wisdom, like feeling like you're a queen of your surroundings, and how can I control it? And what happens as a result is that your emotions take a lot less control of you. You're a lot less reactive to your environment. And it's incredible the effect that it's had on my life, as far as my confidence, and it's a quiet confidence, as far as being able to make myself happy and comprehend what's going on. And then professionally also, it's helped me grow so much. I can take on so much, and my judgment and my assessment and my management skills have also really jumped. And I'm not imitating men. This is also, I think, where feminism goes wrong. They try to imitate men. They try to breach men's territory instead of letting men do what they do. And we've got to start evolving the female fields where women excel. We have enough proof by now to see that women are naturally drawn to other things. I fully believe that if there is a pay gap, it's just because money is much less of a compelling motivation for women. We like to feel emotionally fulfilled. We like to feel useful and beneficial on a much more emotional level to people. And those are beautiful things. If we could raise the fields that we're more drawn to, such as nursing and health and academia and teaching, why don't we raise those to the instead of trying to compete with the fields that men are in and that men thrive in? We should raise the fields that we're part of, bring them up to the same level. But we're not taught to enhance our strengths. It's either reject the feminism, reject the femininity, or compete with men. But it's not. Women need to start really growing and owning their femininity, and in a powerful way, as mothers who are just in total command and respect of their homes. Instead, we're just so confused. We don't know who to be and how to behave. And then you get lost because you're told not to be a woman. But women are naturally drawn to being women, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's a beautiful form of self-expression. So the integration has to come from within. If you feel like you're honestly expressing yourself and your truth and becoming closer and closer to who you are, what happens as a result is you stop caring, like you stop giving a shit what other people think about you, because you're expressing yourself. You don't need the recognition or the accolades or anyone else to approve of what you're doing, because it feels so right and you're being so authentic. It's incredible.
Oh my God, I'm like thinking of things to say, that just kind of like adds on, but it's like I'm just like, God, I'm just totally agreeing with you. And people saying, on the comments, yeah, right, agree totally. So this idea of integration then, so like you mentioned, I'm gobsmacked, like impressed by you, like seriously, I think I'm your biggest fan. So you mentioned one thing which I've only heard myself talk about, and Ken Wilber from who the author of Integral Theory, the notion of the dark night of the soul and the ego death. That's a little bit more commonly heard thing in the sort of self-development circles. But talk to me about the concept of God mode. Have you come across that?
No. In what sense?
So God mode is something that you go into after you transcend the levels of ego death and the dark night of the soul. You actually realize at some point that
you are God.
You are both the devil and God, and both of those are sort of constructs of human mind on some level, and sort of a construct, yeah. That like the sort of the absolute sort of truth of it all is that everything is absolute infinity. Nothing is everything. That's a non-duality unification concept, where really at that point, perhaps controversially even to someone like Jordan Peterson, man is a woman and woman is a man, right? That is like one being.
Absolutely.
Okay. And so um, so this notion of God mode is like when you enter a state, like, whereas the dark night of the soul and the ego death is like helplessness, and it's like, oh, maybe I just want to kill myself, and what's the point of all of this? God mode is like the extreme opposite of that, which is like, I can do absolutely everything, and it's like right here, right now, whatever I point my being to can manifest right this moment, whatever the hell I can imagine. And it's like ego the right way. Yeah. Because you can describe God, the notion of God, as just one humongous giant ego, but integral ego, right? So it's interesting that you say you haven't come across this, but have you come across this kind of as an experience? Have you ever felt like a goddess on earth, or a goddess? Yeah. Tell me more about that.
Listen, first of all, I mean, I've done psychedelic drugs, which definitely can help you break outside of the norm of how receptive you are to your environment. And when you realize how limited we are, if you thought of your body as a purely mechanical vessel, and your eyes interpret the environment around you in a certain way, and your ears interpret sound a certain way, and then you can bust out of that limitation, that gives you this real sense of humility, because you realize, okay, I'm just this one tiny little point of consciousness functioning in the world, and how small you are and how limited you are. But yeah, absolutely. I felt like a goddess. Like I've reached at once after I started meditating, which was probably the single best thing I ever did for myself. It was so hard in the beginning. I understand. I mean, it was so difficult. If you're hyperactive, or if you have an overactive mind or imagination, sitting down and learning how to even just sit still, forget, trying not to think, can be incredibly difficult in the beginning. But there's a certain barrier that once you cross that, you discover this place within yourself. You know, when your eyes are shut, you're not being distracted by the world. And when you go there, there's nothing more real than that. You're so part of the world, and at the same time, you're not of it. And you understand that you're a creator. Like you really are just whatever you want to call it. I don't like the word God, because I feel like a lot of people, it's like a caricature of some old man in the sky. And I don't believe that at all. I believe that God is just our inner dialogue, but it's this endless source of life. You know, if you look at science is going to be an endless field, because we're just exploring ourselves. But it's going to continue forever. That's the very nature of the world. It's always a cycle. It's always refreshing itself. It's this continuous spiral. All you have to do is look at nature and realize, wow, there's a season for everything. Everything constantly grows. They all know what they're doing. Nothing is in a rush ever. Nothing is comparing itself to anything around them. And if you can kind of get into that own rhythm, you do understand. And it's not like I'm a goddess as far as I'm powerful and I could manipulate other people. It's the opposite. It's that I am the queen of my world. You know, I feel the divine, and it's empty. It's not it's an empty feeling. It's a serenity. It's a pure serenity. Like everything is perfect. Everything is at the perfect pace, and it's balanced. It's really it's pretty amazing. And I understand if that's what you mean by God mode. I mean, that's what it's exactly what it feels like. You're not dependent upon anything. I think that's a good way to.
So I'd say and these things become more and more kind of subtle, perhaps, or even you could say they're like extremes on top there. But like it's like whereas ego death or dark night of the soul feel like complete emptiness and nothingness, and there's nothing. The God mode is like the extreme opposite of that, where it's like I'm now full of energy and I can just like move mountains, But then there is the question of purpose as to like, okay, well, like it's a little bit like that film, whatever the Jim Carrey is in, where he's like God, and it's like, I want to be God, but then it's like, if you have all the powers, what the fuck are you gonna do, right? And that's where purpose kicks in. Without purpose, you can't really direct that power into things that you really want to then create.
Yeah, you have to find your purpose.
Yeah,
and you have to find your purpose, because the closer you get to that purpose, I think that could even fuel this God mode, because you're no longer searching. You know that you're on the right track. I think that this is what religion once upon a time tried to do for people, was help direct their actions to do good, to be good, to conduct themselves in a balanced way. The problem is that everything gets corrupted by people. Religion got corrupted by people. Everything gets corrupted because people are after power. And the best way to manipulate people is through their emotions, always. Fear is the strongest one of all. There's a part of us that will actually shut down and not function well if we're under fear. And you see this in most tyrannical countries. And you can even see this, I would say, in Western civilizations today, with the far left try to manipulate people through their feelings and make them feel like they're victims, and they can imagine enemies everywhere. So you're always on the run, and what happens is that your personality becomes an inverse. You're not really developing yourself. You're just kind of always trying to protect yourself from all these things that you are being told, brainwashed, that are a threat to you. I think that's what happened with religion also. It became a way of mind control. I mean, when it came to actualization, yeah, there were figures that we remember, right? Moses and Jesus and Buddha, who reached this really high state of self-actualization. And it's interesting today because on the one hand, we're at a strong advantage. I mean, if you're looking at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we have the bottom, the most important, the base. We've got that taken care of. The majority of us in the Western world, we have homes, we have jobs, we have security, we have food, we have supermarkets everywhere. We don't have to worry about those things anymore. So we really should be at a place now where more and more of us can move into that space of self-actualization and of becoming whole people. We just have to stop comparing ourselves to everyone else. They say comparison is the thief of joy, and that's exactly what it is. If you base your happiness on everyone else around you and where they are, and your perspective is so subjective. Like if you're having a good day, you feel at the top of the world, and if you're having a shit day, it seems like everyone else is doing better. But if it's you versus yourself all the time, you always remember how far you've come, and there's a lot more compassion there for yourself. You have to love yourself at the end of the day. You have to love yourself.
So there is another concept here, and I want to see, if you reach this stage and how you're thinking about this. The idea of transcending fear, which actually, the Maslow's hierarchy of needs has been evolved since then. And this is one thing to be aware of regarding Jordan Peterson. He seems to reside on what we would call an integral theory at level 4, which is rule, role, self. That's why his book is 12 Rules for Life. Okay, He's giving you prescriptions. It's in some sense religious thing. Okay, it's like if you follow these rules, you will get results, which is exactly like the workout thing. You're like, I did this, 100 press-ups thing at one point. I was like, didn't believe I could ever do 100 press-ups, and you start with one day, you do 2 next day, 3 next day, and so on. You build up eventually to 100, and then you do them. It's like, I still can't believe I'm doing this, but I'm doing it. And so it's possible to build big things through rules and just following rules. But beyond rules, there is what's known as rational level. Super achievers go for like winning in everything, and that's focused on I. Rule, role is focused on we. This is where we get religions from, and nation states, and all this kind of law and legal stuff. Beyond rule self is rational, as I said, superachiever. So it's, again, I want to win everything. Beyond superachiever, rational self is green level sensitive, okay, which theoretically, at least, women are a lot more sensitive than men naturally because they take care of babies, etc., etc. But then beyond that is actually integral, and this is spiral dynamics model is the evolution of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And when people reach the integral stage, they start integrating all the 6 levels below, which is instinctive, magic, power, which is ego, rule self, rational, and sensitive, in that order. And they start using all those ways of being, okay, and integrally all the time. You can oscillate between any of that. So if I need to be like a rational dad and say to my son, fucking do your homework, dude, shut the fuck up and do it, I can do that. Or I can, you know, hug my daughter and go, I love you so much. And all that stuff. And it's perfect.
For the next.
And it's perfectly integral thing to do, right?
Because you're in control of yourself. It's almost like you have different tools within yourself, and you know how to draw out the right one at the right time.
Totally. And that's the integral self, focused on the planetary level, you know, fact that we're all going through our own story and our own self-actualization process. But beyond that is holistic self, that's cosmocentric, interplanetary. And beyond that is unified self, that's one with the idea of God, irrespective of religions. So integral self respects religions at level 4. So, you know, Buddhism, Islam, Taoism, Christianity of all forms, whatever, even atheism as a form of religion, no God religion, you know, it's all good at level 4. But there's like 4 or 5 other levels above that, you know, that give you even more juice, you know, to explore and integrate and realize and utilize them, you know, and leverage. So it's for me, it's very interesting because I think I've seen just about every single Jordan Peterson lecture that exists. And really, if you think about it, he is just narrating all the time the same the same stuff from Nietzsche and Carl Jung, and all this stuff is very, very good. But at the same time, it's like 50 years old. Since then, we've had so much more progress of integration and further growth and development and evolution. So it's interesting for me to see that, you know, Jordan Peterson still today suffers from depression and doesn't seem to self-realize that that depression of his is curable by whom? Himself.
It's so fascinating that you mention this, because I think that a lot when I see him. You know, they say, healer, heal thyself. He reminds me so much of Chiron, who was the wounded healer. He was a centaur, supposedly, that was a healer, if you know the tale. And I see that in him. He's obviously, you know, sometimes I think maybe it's just because he's seen so much darkness in his practice. He's seen so many dark sides of humanity. But I do believe that he is still on a journey himself. Absolutely. And I do fear for him sometimes that maybe he's a little bit lost in his work. At the end of the day, this is his work. So he is helping people, perhaps younger people, how to create the structure or the base that they can build upon. But I do think I agree with you completely that somewhere there he's trapped. I wonder if maybe it is the religion that's actually becoming his Achilles heel in a sense, because you know, archetypes and myths, these things are incredibly useful. If you want to, you know, why are we drawn to stories? Why are we drawn to archetypes? Because it gives you something to imagine, right? So you can imagine yourself as a wise mother, or the queen, or a crone, or the maiden, and you can embody that. And that's very helpful for us to have a figure that we can imagine. But it really, at some point, you have to go beyond that. And I look, he is doing something very good. I think he's holding a perspective of the need for freedom, and that's incredibly important because the United States they're in kind of a predicament right now in America. Like the mainstream has been hijacked by this fear-mongering thought. I mean, this is what governments do. This is what people who are in power want to do. They try to make people their pawns and their slaves to their thought. And not everyone's having it. I think that a lot of people are awake enough to realize that they don't want to be puppets and that there's something very wrong with that, with thinking like that, with behaving like that, with being treated like that by your government. So the only way to negate that is to empower the individual. But in order to do that, you have to get in touch with self-love. And in a society, though, that worships ideas way too much, we've kind of lost touch with the spiritual. Everything you talked about, religion, atheism, they're all faiths. Atheism is also a faith, right? It's also believing that something does or doesn't exist and then building upon that. You have to release all these ideas. I mean, start understanding that we know nothing and waking up every single day. And there's such a beautiful, like, it keeps you in touch with the kid inside of you because you're really curious. It's you're born into a new world every single day, and you're so curious as to what can I discover today. But it's not in an attitude where you're just trying to hoard ideas, where I just want to find out what makes sense so that it can become my idea. Quite the opposite. I think it's so freeing when you realize you were wrong about something, and that means that you've discovered something that makes even more sense. And that helps you get closer and closer to what's real and care less and less. You're not attached to these ideas and notions. They're not defining you. But we really are in a society that I think esteems knowledge way too much, esteems getting grades at school and how much you know and having really good ideas, instead of helping people understand who they are internally and how to develop skills and talents from the heart, because that helps you become whole. If you want to be, when you're whole, you don't care anymore about, it's not of importance to you anymore what your foundation is. It's more, what can I do? How can I be? How can I act? You're not living from a selfish survival place anymore. And it's incredible. And when you reach that place, some things like war and oppression don't even make sense. It doesn't even make sense.
So, you talk about war. Actually, my story is that I came to UK as a refugee from Bosnia. So I spent 3 years in war when I was a teenager, from 11 to 14. And I am actually Muslim as well. So, living in UK for 23 years, I had to come to terms with everything that happened in Bosnia and why I became a refugee, etc., etc., and integrate all of that into my existence, and realize that that's actually also part of the perfection of my life, because without the war in Bosnia, I would have never met my wife in UK. I would have never had our children, and all that stuff. So, my life is perfect because of war in the past. But at the same time, I'm by no means a proponent of war. If anything, I'd love to, if there's one thing I'd like to eradicate in this world, it would be war of any kind. And as you were effectively saying, that there's the war with oneself, that we're waging, and we're battling our true self, as opposed to embracing that and trusting the process to take us forward in a natural evolutionary way. I never asked you, actually, no, what do you do these days?
Like professionally?
Well, professionally, or, what's your kind of main, maybe not just professionally, but, what are the sort of kind of core things that you like to do?
Well, I happen to love my profession. I do content and digital marketing for health and wellness and fitness products mostly. and I travel a lot, and I love what I do because I bring the honesty into marketing, which is not easy, but it's really finding products that you believe in and understanding how to communicate that with people. So that's what I do professionally. Otherwise, I look for things like this. I look for people. It's really, for me, a matter of bringing myself into alignment. Everyone talks about big changes that they want to make. And I think that it's most important. There's so much you can do in your immediate environment that is so useful. And even just your behavior can make such an impression on people when you do the right thing, or when you're extra kind or extra compassionate. So forget about fixing the whole world. If we all focus more on just being the best, being ourselves, living from an honest place, that has a major impact. And otherwise, I really enjoy speaking to people. Women especially, I think, are often very confused, I would say. And what I do when I speak to people is I try to find where they are, because for sometimes it feels very isolating. There aren't a lot of people who are as self-aware or have such a deep sense of self. So I've been very fortunate where I have a few close friends that we can go there. Otherwise, sometimes people come in and out, and it's obvious for an obvious purpose. Sometimes it only becomes obvious later. But as far as what I can do, is just utilize this awareness and see when I talk to people, try to find where they have a little crack and put something inside there. And sometimes it's a good word, and sometimes it's clarification or a new point of view. And sometimes it's like putting in a little seed that will then grow, and they aren't even aware of it. So you're in a sense making things better for people and it's the most selfless way of doing it. It's so fulfilling. It's so fulfilling. Yeah, that's pretty much how I live.
No, it's just really amazing to see how, and I can tell nowadays just by looking at people, for 10 seconds, I can tell just by like whether they're jittering, or things like that, what the state of their mind is. Yeah. And, just observing, we've now been speaking for like an hour, and, you haven't jittered at all. You're completely calm, collected, grounded, integrated, right? And that's very, very, very powerful to observe. And no wonder I was just kind of watching your video, without blinking an eyelid and really listening to what you were saying, and today as well. So that's very cool. So listen, I could speak to you forever, I think, but let's call it a day at this point.
Yeah,
and maybe,
for sure.
Maybe, who knows, maybe we can do some sort of a thing around this and make it more of a kind of a regular, little bit kind of touching on some of these points, because I've just to give you a little bit of background on my end, through this process of going through Fresh Mind, and now I'm coaching my wife through it. I'm coaching my coach Anthony. I'm coaching him now, so it's like a mirror effect, right? When he coached me through everything, he didn't believe. I said, like, look, I think this is the only solution I have, because I've tried everything else. I've tried meditation. I've tried, with coaching, blah, blah, like specific coaching, all that stuff. None of that really worked. And if it created a little bit of effects, but not like enough. Like I'm looking for I want everything. Okay, let's face it, I want everything. There's nothing wrong with that.
Sure.
So it's like, I'm just like, I didn't realize I had everything, right? And this is a big thing, right? You can't have everything and then not realize. You're still looking for something else because you don't realize it. And so and I said, look, Anthony, I want you to coach me through this. And like, I think this is my last chance, to fix me, right? Because otherwise I don't know what else would work. And he didn't believe it. I kind of didn't believe it, but I was like, let's go follow the process and see what happens. And then it worked really, really well. And Anthony was like, dude, I want you to coach. You're coaching me next, because, you know, like I can't be watching you having so many results, right? And I feel so behind now. Even though what we do is like, I don't know if you've come across this term of developmental coaching.
Mm-hmm.
Have you come across that before?
I mean, not specifically.
It's a very simple concept of that, like as you're coaching somebody else, you actually develop with them, because the realizations that they're having, you're like, this actually, you know, applies to my life too. You know, I'm bagging that one, right? So it's not that like, oh, I gotta coach this person. It's like, cool, I gotta coach this person because I know I'm gonna find out a bunch of things, right?
Yeah,
so
you learn more about yourself.
Exactly. And so as Anthony coached me, he was like making shit ton of notes, right? And now I'm coaching him and I'm making shit ton of notes, right? And the bonding that we're getting, right, as people. And it's like, you know, I met Anthony on Facebook, you know, it's like we've got theoretically nothing in common, right?
Yeah.
Yet we're absolutely brothers.
It's incredible.
And
you know, it's missing a lot, because I think with social media, we try so hard to only put our best face forward, right? Like our best photo and our happiest Facebook vacation. And it's actually our weaknesses that bring us closer together, when we can use each other as mirrors, right? And as crutches, but you have to learn how to be vulnerable to do that. And what it does, it actually makes you stronger. It's amazing. I mean, I love that. That's incredible.
Totally. Just another example, talking about women, right?
Yeah.
So after the other person, right? The other person that kind of ended up shaking me and got like, I want fresh mind too, right? Was my wife, right? Okay. And you know, she literally started shaking me at one point. It's like, whatever it is that you did, I want that too, right? And then it's like, okay, I wasn't expecting that, but you know, and that's a little bit kind of almost like, you know, but it was like, because I'd already gone through Fresh Mind in the past, I would have like reacted to that and go, hey, who are you to be shaking me? You know, I need my own space, whatever. I was like, all right, sit down, let's start.
How was that?
And so far we've gone through 3 sessions with her, which is the first part of that process is what we call complete catharsis. So you go through every single what we call dirt, psychosocial dirt or baggage, right? And you just talk it through. And I had this experience with her, which is actually really profound in itself, talking about women and integration. Because my wife's actually 5 years older than me. I'm 36, she's like 41 now. And she's also been through the war in Bosnia, but she was in the parts where you know there was active war going on, shelling, you know, all that kind of stuff. Whereas I was in the bit where there was more kind of psychological warfare being done. And so she had like, I've known her now for like over 15 years. She had like continuous nightmares since the war, you know, and she'd wake up in the middle of the night and just, you know, cold sweat, everything. And I know exactly what it's from. It's like, to me, it was like, we're going to have to live with her like this. That's it. And I went through this 3 sessions of complete catharsis, and I was just asking her, you know, questions. And it's like 8 hours all in all. And at the end of that, I said to her, like, how do you feel now? And she goes, I feel 80% better, because this is the first time in my life that somebody just sat with me and listened to me talk without butting back in with a comment and, oh, it happened to me too, I have that same thing, or blah, blah, blah. I was like, cool. And you know what happened? Her nightmares stopped altogether. She doesn't have them anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, I see that a lot with psychotrauma, is that it just needs to be validated. You really just need someone to listen and say, it's okay that you feel that way, without changing your feelings or giving you advice. Just saying, it's okay, I get it. It's amazing, because you need that too, right? I mean, a lot of PTSD is an unwillingness to accept the events. And that's really all you need to do, is just say, hey, yeah, I'm human, and that's what happens. And that's incredible. How has that been for your marriage, for your relationship? Is it bringing you closer together?
Yeah, absolutely, and we definitely want to complete the fresh mind process for her as well, because for us this is also like a process of gathering more information and insights, right? Whether this process works, because it really kind of came out of desperation from my end, but
Yeah.
because I've spent like years of my life, like you know what my job is? My job is user experience designer, so I've been designing experiences all my life. So for me, when I feel desperate, I reach out to my toolbox, which is designing experiences, and go, okay, so this desperation is inspiring me to solve that problem. Okay, solve self. Okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
solve self. And so my desperation turned into inspiration. Okay, and I always say that inspiration is more powerful than desperation. But this desperation can kick off a lot of inspiration. That's why a lot of
Sure.
pop songs are written, you know, it's like, oh my gosh, she left me, blah, blah. It's like, okay, came
Yeah.
out of pain, right? But so so as we're doing Fresh Mind, like firsthand, and I've always believed that, like, if I design something or do something, you talked about wellness products, you know, things that where you don't have to lie. Like Seth Godin, I've done this before. Check this out. In a conference where it was like predominantly marketing conference, and they asked me as a user experience designer to speak there, right? I turned up and I said, all marketers are liars. And I was just like, whoa. I said, that's just the title of the book by one of the greatest marketers, Seth Godin, right?
Yeah.
Who wrote that. I'm just saying that's the title of the book. I'm not even saying that that's true. Yeah.
Right.
But oh my God, these people
The
were like
reaction. That's so funny.
hating me. And it's like, have you actually read the book? Right? Because so
Well, he's funny. That's his humor. He's very sarcastic.
Exactly, and it's, you know, if I reflect back on those moments, it's just kind of like how egotistical these people are, right?
Yeah.
And they can't sort of break out of themselves and sort of self-observe and meta-observe, and yeah. So it's like as we're coaching people through Fresh Mind, we're gathering data, both
Right.
quantitative and qualitative.
So it's a new program. You want to see what the UX, how effective it is. But that's incredible. I mean, see how far you can take that, because if it sounds like it's been incredibly productive for both you and, you know, and starting to be for your wife also. And Lord knows everyone could use those tools, and not everyone can afford going into real therapy or wants to even. And this is even a way of bringing people together.
Well, actually, you know, what we are realizing through this process is that what you call the real therapy operates at the level 4, rules and roles. Okay.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, sit down, you shall do this. Right.
Follow
And
this method.
yeah, exactly. And it's like this person is maybe at level 5 or 6, and the therapist cannot actually comprehend what the person is talking about, because they themselves haven't got there in their own self-actualization process.
Right.
And so you actually, and this is what we find, is that if you want to be coached into self-actualization, which we also believe is possible,
okay.
If you want to be coached into self-actualization, you got to be coached by a person who is at least one level above you in the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Right? Which makes perfect sense, logical sense.
They need to know the territory they're guiding you into.
Totally, and it's a totally repeatable process as well. And that's why I found Anthony, like, who in many people's like eyes was like this kind of crazy guy. I was like, this guy isn't crazy at all. He naturally somehow knows things that I'm aiming for, and I gotta have him coach me, because as I blurt out to him my psychosocial traumas, he'll immediately be able to kind of, you know, and sometimes I call him soul surgeon, right? It's like he'll be able to heal my soul by actually interpreting it from a higher perspective and go, oh, that's that problem there. We can close it off that way. And that's how we did it. And now I'm at an enough level of self-awareness to be able to coach him without going like, what the fuck is he talking about, right? So it's kind of very, very, very interesting process, and the most inspirational thing I've ever done.
That's incredible.
So
incredible, absolutely incredible.
I think we could talk about this forever, and let's do that. Why not? Let's do that. So thank you so much, Marni, for joining this talk.
Thank you, Jason.
Let's do another one at some point in the future, and please keep in touch. You know, I say, like, you know what I say to people now. I remember, you know what happened to me when I left Bosnia. I was like in a refugee camp for 2 days in Croatia, and I, quote unquote, sort of like fell in love with a girl. Right, it's like in a day, right? And what ended up happening is, you know, a couple of years later, I was on the internet, and we're in this like Bosnia room hangout, okay, on the AOL, and I sort of DM this person. It's like, who are you? And she says her name, blah, blah, blah. And I said, like, oh, were you in so-and-so refugee camp on 95? She goes, yeah, how do you know? I was like, it was just a random guess, right? Because I was there too. And I say, like, do you remember me? And so on. She's like, yeah. And I was like, send me your pictures. She sends me her picture. It's that girl. I find her randomly on the internet back in 97, okay? And she was in USA. And, you know, she's like, God, give me your phone number. I'll phone you right now. And she phones me. We spoke for like 2 hours. And she was like, I feel so much better now that I've kind of refound you, you know, and so on. And you know, it's just kind of like a healing process in itself of a sort.
Sure.
But what I'm trying to say through this kind of long-winded story is that, like, I feel now I'm able to kind of connect with people this year specifically in this kind of integral way, and really talk about things that matter in an open fashion, okay? And it's become much more meaningful. And I suppose that people like Jordan Peterson have played a major role in doing stuff like, you know, putting his entire lectures online, right?
Yeah.
So and sort of putting his heart out there, you know.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much, I think, the best thing that he did is that he put that it was okay for the narrative to include negative things. And I think that made people feel a lot less alone with their inner struggles, because we don't live in a society at large which helps cultivate that or embrace the negatives. So the fact that people realize, hey, I'm not the only person that feels this way, and it's okay, and he gives them words to be able to express these things. I think that's the greatest gift. Look, I'm a big fan of his. I don't love everything he does. I don't agree with all his beliefs, but I think that he's had a very positive effect at bringing people together and comprehending things that we normally don't want to think about. And just feeling like that's okay. It's okay. You're normal. You're a person. Everyone goes through this shit. Don't worry about it.
Totally. It's totally a process, and there's quite a lot of work to do, but it's the most fulfilling and rewarding process, really.
Yeah, it is fulfilling. It also, you know, I think the best thing for me was that I let go of control. I used to be a lot more intense and afraid, and because you're not really aspiring to something. You're not really going somewhere. It just keeps getting better, but there isn't an end goal, and you stop caring about needing to have an end goal because the journey is so fucking fantastic.
Yeah, it's more like a general direction. It's not a destination. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And you feel it out, and it changes all the time, and occurrences happen that suddenly make sense in ways that you couldn't comprehend beforehand. It really is that what you're conscious of becomes so much sharper and sharper, and it makes life, you know, people ask a lot about like what the meaning of life is. right? What's the meaning of life? That's such a famous question, but life is the meaning.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's living that is the meaning, the process of living and of discovering things. No one's ever been able to predict the future. You know, like you can spend too much time in your mind trying to assess what's going to happen tomorrow, and it's not going to happen. If you just are able to literally just walk through life from this very serene place without any expectations, you're never disappointed, and you just fall into the pace of things. You realize that everything is perfect and always, you know, and it releases stress and releases anxiety and and depression, because people have a false model of the world. And if you can let that all go, nothing will ever, things don't stress you out. You know, that's why, yeah, everything is perfect all the time, because it really resonates that's how it is.
Actually, in the spiral dynamics model on the level 8, that's called flex flow state, flexible flow, which is also described quite a bit in a book called Effortless Mastery by Kenny Werner, who's an amazing pianist who just plays from space, you know, just let the piano play itself.
Yeah.
And he runs, like, there's now a whole effortless mastery department at Berklee College of Music, Boston, you know, where he takes the formally educated musicians into his effortless mastery institute and just tells them, put your hands on the piano and just let your fingers, you know, play the keys like that. Don't think about anything, just let the fingers play, and then contemplate about who's playing.
Fascinating.
Yeah. And I just watched this one you know, lecture for 1 hour, and when I saw that, it was like, blew my mind so much. I was like, I'm going to the piano because I play piano, right? I went to the piano and just kind of let go of my mind as I was playing, and I was playing like 30% better instantly. I was like, whoa, crazy.
Yeah.
So we ended up integrating that into Fresh Mind as well, effortless mastery.
Your brain, when things are calculated, it can prevent so much. You know, when you let the brain run the show, it's not good. It only knows the data that you've already learned, right? Your brain doesn't really have any imagination or intuition. So trying to figure things out where you really need to feel it out doesn't work if you try to use your mind for, you know, your mind is like it's a tool. It can help you take in the environment and complement and like arrange things into different areas of reason, but beyond that, it doesn't do much for you. And people live in their minds too much, not in that state of flow. That's where we're connected, where our creative juices really come out, where you can do the things that you can't imagine, you can't think about, because it has, you know, you bring it into reality.
But, you know, there's a sort of, you know, I said we're going to finish, but there's a couple of more things perhaps that's worth pointing out. There's the idea here that, you know, when people talk about mind, they sort of point to the head, as in like it's in the head, it's in the brain. But there is the idea here, and I'm sort of still working through this one myself, that in all these kind of quote unquote physical organs like brain, heart, gut, okay, they're all brains, okay? So really the integral theory in many respects in the Maslow's hierarchy of needs is talking about the chakras, right? As you go up to the crown chakra, that's why you're talking about queen, right? But beyond crown is God, okay? So it's like God is higher than the queen, you know, or king, and there is also, you know, king and the queen, but one God, really. And, you know, Jordan Peterson talks about this on, like, you know, as in like the eye of the pyramid and all that stuff. But so the idea here is that there is really kind of just the soul and the mind being the unified body, right? All these kind of sensing centers, brain, heart, gut, balls, right? Vagina for women, right? And you know, once you kind of use all of that to experience the surrounding,
Yeah.
Your soul is the sort of intangible self, okay? But once you unify your soul and mind together, body mind, then you have unified self.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what we talk about as far as alignment, bringing it all together.
Yeah,
you know.
totally.
And it's everything, like you said, from your sexuality, from owning your sexuality, being in touch with your sexuality. I think that's also something that's missing a lot. People feel ashamed, or they repress it, or I mean, you have to get in touch with it. You have to know how to satisfy yourself. You have to enjoy it, use it as a form of expression. Sex can be an incredible experience that's in the moment, and an organic expression between a man and a woman, or a man and a man, or a woman and a woman, whatever it is. It can be so intimate, so vulnerable, so beautiful. And then, yeah, there's the dark side also. It can be something purely physical and demeaning or dirty. Find the balance with everything within you. If you bring everything, your voice, your heart, everything into alignment, including your mind. Your mind is the last thing, right? That's the crown chakra, is your mind. Then you can almost access that, where everything else kind of falls away. It doesn't matter. Nothing else matters. You're expressing yourself from a higher place.
Yeah, because even in psychology, they'd say mind over matter.
Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah, exactly. We've actually managed to unify all these statements that seem to be like, seemingly disparate, right? We can unify them and explain them as to where they reside, because like you see people share things on Facebook, Twitter, la la la. One of the projects we want to work on is to map out where the wisdom statements reside, at which level of self-awareness, because there's certain sort of, like the Jordan Peterson wisdom from 12 Rules of Life is squarely at level 4, okay, which is perfectly fine, necessary for a nice, integral, solid life. But then there is wisdom, from non-duality perspective, and all these kind of integral wisdom and so on. So very interesting to like, because I remember as a child, I was reading a lot of these wisdom books, and I was just like, I have no fucking idea what these guys are talking about.
Right, absolutely. You revisit things later in life.
And
if
now,
you're missing the foundation, you can't reach that. You can't get there.
Totally. And now I just kind of lap through it. It's like, yeah, it's like good stuff, but keep working at it.
Yeah.
So yeah. So all right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Have a beautiful
Thank you.
weekend.
It's been a pleasure. Yeah. Thank you so much. We can do this again anytime.
All right.
And good luck with your program.
Definitely. Okay. Thank you. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.